Chapter 18 looks at organized crime and gangs. So, organized crime and criminal gangs are essentially groups of criminals that have kind of banded together and commit criminal acts together or for the same cause. These criminal acts and the members have always been prosecuted under state and federal laws, so their crimes can be anywhere from murder, extortion, illegal gambling, prostitution. We kind of have two different issues when we're talking about prosecutions, though. The leaders of these organizations are often well insulated, so we may be getting lower level members, but the head of the operations and the leaders of these organizations are often pretty well protected, and they're more difficult to prosecute. And the danger of committing crimes as part of organized crime. We have your common day criminal, but whenever you put a band of criminals together, it becomes a little more dangerous because there's more people. And we've talked about in various different classes what we know to be mob mentality, meaning one person gets an idea and then they kind of pull everybody in, and what was dangerous to begin with maybe became very, very dangerous and very, very serious because of the number of people that are involved in it. So, after 1970, federal and state statutes focused on membership in criminal enterprises. So, in 2002, there was a study done of gangs and organized crime, and whenever they published their findings, there was 30,000 gangs with over 800,000 members, and although that's the most recent data that we have in the textbook that we're using, that's a significant number of individuals. Where we live in rural America may not be quite as prevalent, but definitely in larger urban areas, there is a criminal presence and organized crime in gangs. So organized crime is a highly structured, they have highly structured leaderships. They have a top, and then they kind of trickle down from there. But there's typically one or a small group of leaders in that that criminal enterprise. Federal and state statutes focus on persons who engage in this pattern of criminal activity. And RICO laws, as we call them, they make it these laws make it a crime to belong or own a criminal enterprise, such as an organization that has committed two or more crimes that have to do with like gambling, drugs, violent crimes, and the members' conduct was designed to further the interest of the criminal enterprise. Interstate acts. Not necessarily something that you need to focus too much on, but I'll just go through them real quick with you. Examples of interstate acts under RICO: a gang robbing a convenience store in different states. Different states is important to note. Members using interstate communication systems to commit criminal acts, such as sending illegal contraband via FedEx, UPS, something like that. Members buying guns or goods used in criminal acts from a seller in another state, shipping illegal drugs or proceeds of illegal activities between states, and using the internet as part of criminal schemes. If you look, there's a common pattern here. Interstate means multiple locations, not right next door to one another. Witness protection kind of fits in here with organized crime. So as part of the efforts to combat organized crime, and the Federal Witness Protection Program offers a new life to those who testify against criminal enterprises. So for those who have gone against organized crime, and organized crimes can be very, very large. If you look at like the mafia, this was not just a small operation, but rather a very large operation. So there were a lot of people who were very unhappy with any witnesses. Same thing with gangs, and I know we'll get into gangs a little bit more, but one real life example I can give you was whenever I worked at the prison, we had to take note of who was associated with what gangs, because it's possible that individuals in prison would be targeted because of their gang activity, or more so, could be going to prison to retaliate for some some gang activity on the part of another person. So money laundering is a crime. It's disguising money obtained illegally and channeling it through a legitimate source. So you've seen movies where there might be somebody who is actually selling guns or drugs, but they own a laundromat, or they own a little convenience store, or a nail salon or what have you. But they're saying that people are using those services, and they're funneling that money in slowly. To make it look like they have more customers than they do, or they had more sales than they do. But essentially what they're doing is they're taking their illegal money and trying to clean it up, so that it looks legitimate. So being dishonest about their money, and then making monetary transactions, means depositing or withdrawing, transferring funds from one financial institution to another, or a credit union or brokerage, a house, so on. The person entering the transaction had to know that the funds or the property transferred came from criminal activities, for this to be a crime and for prosecution. Unlike other money laundering crimes, the prosecution need not prove the transaction was intended to conceal the criminal source of funds. So last few points here that I want to go over. So in addition to so-called Little RICO laws, these are state level laws. They focus on gang membership, your criminal street gangs. Usually those are a gang of 3 or more who have a common name, dress, or symbol, and who engage in a pattern of criminal activities. Many states also make participation of 2 or more persons in an assault a gang assault. You may also have heard of the term gang rape. So a few facts about gangs that I want to go over. Most gangs, street gangs, are delinquents. They're found in inner cities, smaller towns, sometimes suburbs, and rural areas are not safe from all of the gang activity. They're typically organized along ethnic or racial lines. So you may have Asian, Hispanic, Jewish, Russian, African American, and Irish gangs. They typically participate in drug dealings, guns, shoplifting, things like that. Oftentimes gangs will start very small, and then after they gain a few members, then they start to expand out. And so what started in one very small neighborhood might become very large. One of the most notorious gangs would be like the Bloods. And it's that you've probably heard blood in, blood out. That's a true sentiment for gangs, apparently. I'm obviously not a gang member, but so to be a member, blood needs to be spilled, and then blood has to be spilled if that person tries to leave the gangs. Black Gangster Disciples is another gang. Latin Kings. Let's see. Last few things. So I know we talked about organized crime at the beginning, and gang memberships and things like that. Whenever we talk about gangs versus organized crimes, gangs are typically a looser affiliation, meaning that they're more like cliques. And they typically are a little more decentralized. There's not necessarily the strong leadership that there would be with organized crime.